the mountain of courage, Zainab and the flower of light. Once, in a quiet valley tucked between towering mountains and endless forests, there lived a young girl named Zainab. She was not like most people in her village. Where others accepted the world as it was, Zainab was a dreamer. She would sit for hours near the old banyan tree at the edge of the village, gazing at the faraway peaks whose tips disappeared into the clouds. From a distance, they seemed to be painted in soft shades of silver and blue, sometimes glowing pink at dawn or gold at sunset. To Zainab, they were more than rocks and snow, they were a call, a mystery waiting to be explored. Her village, nestled in fertile fields, had always depended on the rhythm of the seasons. Crops grew, festivals came and went, and life carried on. But there was one story, told in whispers by the elders, that had been passed down for generations. It spoke of a magical flower that grew only on the highest mountain peak. This flower, they said, was not just beautiful, it carried the essence of courage itself. Whoever found it would understand the deepest truth of life, that no challenge is too great when faced with determination, and that true magic lies not in objects, but in the strength of one's heart. Most villagers dismissed the story as a tale to entertain restless children at night. It's just a legend, they would say, smiling at the curiosity in young eyes. But Zainab was different. To her, the legend was not just a story, it was a possibility. And so, one day, after a heavy storm had washed the valley clean, she stood at the foot of the mountain, her heart pounding with both fear and excitement. She carried a small bag with a loaf of bread, a flask of water, and her grandmother's old scarf. She told no one of her plan, not because she wanted to hide it, but because she knew the villagers would try to stop her, out of worry or disbelief. As she looked up at the vast mountain, its slopes sharp and unwelcoming, she whispered to herself, "I will find it, not because I want the flower, but because I want to know what I am truly capable of." The journey began gently, with soft meadows and a cool breeze. Birds sang in the nearby trees, and for a while, the path seemed almost welcoming. But mountains, like life, often test you when you least expect it. Soon the meadows gave way to thorny bushes that tore at her clothes and scratched her skin. Every step forward required care, every bush seemed determined to keep her from moving on. Zainab felt pain, but she refused to turn back. "If thorns can't stop flowers from blooming," she muttered, smiling despite the cuts on her hands, "then they won't stop me from finding one." As she climbed higher, the rain came, first as a drizzle, then as a relentless downpour. The soil beneath her feet turned slippery, and paths that had seemed solid became treacherous. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, and the mountain began to feel like an enemy. She shivered and found shelter under an overhanging rock, waiting for the rain to pass. It was then, in the cold silence between thunderclaps, that doubt crept in. "What am I doing?" she thought. "Perhaps the villagers were right. Perhaps this is just a foolish dream." Tears mixed with raindrops on her cheeks. But as she sat there, hugging her knees, a memory of her grandmother's voice floated back. "Courage, Zainab, is not the absence of fear. It's the choice to keep walking even when you are afraid." The storm eventually passed, leaving behind a raw, quiet world, washed clean and smelling of earth. Zainab stood, her legs heavy but her spirit rekindled. She knew the hardest part still lay ahead. The upper slopes were steep and rocky, with loose stones that shifted underfoot. The thin air made breathing difficult, and exhaustion gnawed at her muscles. There were moments when she wanted to scream, moments when she simply collapsed against a boulder and stared at the endless sky, wondering why the mountains seemed to stretch on forever. But something inside her, a spark, perhaps the very essence of human perseverance, refused to go out. Every time she thought she could not take another step, she would imagine the flower, glowing softly, waiting for her. It was not greed that pulled her upward, it was hope, hope that her struggle had meaning, that on the other side of hardship lay not just a magical bloom but a deeper understanding of life itself. At last, after what felt like days, though it had only been one long, brutal climb, Zainab reached the summit. The world around her opened like a vast, infinite ocean of clouds and sky. Below her lay valleys she had never seen, rivers that sparkled like silver threads, and mountains upon mountains rolling into the horizon. And there, growing from a crack in the cold, unforgiving stone, was the flower. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, delicate yet radiant, petals that seemed to hold sunlight even though the sky was now gray with approaching dusk. It was alive in a way ordinary flowers were not, almost humming with a quiet energy. Zainab knelt before it, her heart pounding not from the climb but from awe. She reached out, then paused. In that still moment, she understood something profound. The flower was not magical because of what it could give. It was magical because of what it represented. It had survived where nothing else had. It had bloomed in hardship, high above where others dared to go. It was a mirror of her own journey, fragile yet unstoppable, beautiful not in ease but in resilience. With a gentle touch, she plucked the flower, not out of desire to own it, but as a promise, a reminder of what courage and determination could achieve. The descent was easier, not because the path had changed, but because she had. Every step down carried a quiet triumph. The thorns still scratched, the rocks still slipped, the cold still bit at her fingers, but now she moved with the calm strength of someone who had faced herself and won. When she returned to the village, the people were astonished. They gathered around as she held up the flower, its glow faint but steady. The elders, who had dismissed the legend, now stared in silence. The children's eyes widened in wonder. But Zainab did not boast. She simply smiled and said, "This flower is not the magic. The magic is in courage, in effort, in not giving up even when the path is full of thorns and storms. If you try, if you keep trying, no difficulty is too great. Courage shows the way." From that day on, the village changed. People began to look at challenges differently. Farmers tried new ways to grow crops, traders dared to explore distant markets, children studied with a newfound eagerness. It wasn't that a single flower could transform a community, it was that a single act of courage could inspire others to believe in themselves. Zainab kept the flower in a small clay pot by her window. Every morning she would water it, not because it needed much care, but because it reminded her of who she had become. Sometimes, travelers passing through the village would hear of her story and ask to see the magical bloom. She would let them, but always with the same words, "The true flower is not in the pot, it's the strength inside you, waiting to bloom when you dare to climb your own mountain." Years later, as Zainab grew older, the story of her journey became a cherished legend in its own right. Children would gather in the evenings to hear her speak of storms and rocks, of fear and perseverance, of the moment the world seemed too vast and her heart too small, and of how, step by step, she learned that the human spirit is bigger than any mountain. And somewhere, high above, on lonely peaks where the winds howl and snow never fully melts, perhaps another flower was waiting, ready to test the courage of the next dreamer. Because mountains will always stand. Storms will always come. But so will the brave, those who dare to believe that within hardship lies beauty, and within each of us lies the power to climb, to strive, and to bloom.